Hello, Johnny from Eurogamer here, and oh goodness me, Life is Strange 2. If you haven't already seen it, Aoife and I played through the entirety of the first episode and it's ready for you to watch right now, which, incidentally, is why you can see us in the corner of this video here. So far, Life is Strange 2 is pretty darn excellent, and this being Life is Strange, it also has our minds racing about what's to come. There's lots to unpick from the first episode, so without any further ado, here are 7 theories about Life is Strange 2 after episode 1. Massive spoilers ahead, obviously, for Life is Strange 2 episode 1, and the odd reference to the games that came before it. You have very much been warned. First, we haven't seen the last of Brody. The events of episode 1 were pretty traumatic for both Diaz brothers, to say the very least, even after you consider the fact Daniel was blissfully unaware of much of it. Sean and Daniel see their father get shot dead in front of them, they're subject to multiple instances of racial prejudice, and they're thrown into a new life punctuated by cold, hunger, exhaustion, suspicion, and desperation, and all of this at the ages of 16 and 9 respectively. In all honesty, it made Season 1 Episode 1 look like a very twee walk in the park, and lest we forget, we see Chloe Price get shot in that one. With all this taken into account, it's no wonder that meeting Brody, an itinerant blogger who looks suspiciously like yours truly, is such a breath of fresh air. Brody is kind and patient where others are suspicious and confrontational. He's the first person the Diaz brothers meet who actually bothers to listen to them, and he proves himself to be kind and empathetic even after he reveals he knows exactly who Sean and Daniel are. The kindness he shows and the advice he gives Sean as they look out over Arcadia Bay is one of the most touching moments of the episode, giving our 16-year-old protagonist a much-needed emotional release, sure, but also a glimmer of hope for the first time since his life was violently changed forever. Shortly after, Brody went on his way, but not before telling the boys how they could get in touch with him several times. Given the impact he made on both of the Diaz boys, and the fact he himself is on the road, it really wouldn't surprise me if they reached out to him further on down the line, possibly in a moment of desperation, and their paths crossed for a second time. Our second theory is that, unfortunately, we haven't seen the last of the Stampers either. The visit to the Stampers gas station for food and supplies was one of the more tense portions of Season 2 Episode 1. Even when it was just the relatively kind Doris running the shop, Sean's realisation that their faces were literally front page news really hammered home the risk they were taking in coming into contact with other people. Knowing that they might be recognised at any moment was enough to turn even the most everyday conversation into a heart-pounding interrogation. Unfortunately, things only got worse as Mr. Stamper turned up and immediately showed himself to be a suspicious, bullying, violent racist. Technically, yes, he was apprehending fugitives, but the brutality and frankly the glee he demonstrated in the way he handled the situation immediately earned Mr. Stamper a place among the biggest monsters in Life is Strange history. As a result, I didn't really feel very much sympathy for him when Daniel unleashed his powers on the store, but it did fill me with a sense of dread. Stamper's personal insecurity makes him genuinely dangerous, and, given the damage done to his store, I don't think he's going to let it go that easily. If I had to put money on it, I'd say he's about to saddle up and start chasing Sean and Daniel, unless, of course, he died in the incident, in which case the situation is even worse. Even if the boys chose not to steal from the store, in other words, I think Stamper is too proud and, simply, too hateful to fade away into the background. It's worth saying, however, that Aoife disagrees with me on this one. We were talking about it before I recorded this video, and she said it's more powerful that it's a game showing the experience of people of colour, namely hundreds of never-ending microaggressions. In other words, she thinks there'll be more than enough racists in other parts of the country, so there's no real reason to bring the Stampers back specifically. And that is a very good point, although personally I still think Mr. Stamper is exactly the kind of butthole who would make a cross-country crusade out of it. Hopefully for Sean and Daniel's sake, Aoife's right and I am wrong, because he was just horrible. Talking of Aoife's theories and things bubbling up from the past, she reckons we'll revisit the incident that started it all, which is a pretty great shout. Obviously, Sean revisited the awful confrontation that saw his father shot dead at several points during episode 1, especially whenever Daniel mentioned wanting to see his dad or one of the comforts of home. But really, at this point, neither brother has even begun to process what's happened. The consequences of that terrible day are constantly nipping at the boys' heels as they make their way across the country, so really it's never very far away, but given its importance, I think it's pretty much a dead cert that the incident will be revisited in some way as the story progresses. Perhaps there's an eyewitness we didn't know about, or maybe we'll revisit it as Daniel's memory of the incident itself starts to come back to him. Whether there's new info to be gleaned from the incident or not, you can bet we'll be going back to it in some way or another. And talking of Daniel learning new things, actually, our fourth Life is Strange theory is that telekinetic puzzles are on the way. I think it's pretty well established at this point that Daniel has some extremely powerful telekinetic abilities, enough to flip a car and decimate part of a street, to be precise. Now, granted, so far we've only seen Daniel use his powers in moments of extreme distress, and during those moments he certainly doesn't seem to have very much control over his supernatural potential, but then the post-credit sequence of episode 1 strongly hints at a training sequence in which Sean guides his younger brother to use his powers in a calmer, more targeted way. Kind of like Yoda training Luke Skywalker to stack rocks in The Empire Strikes Back. Now, we also know from the adventures of Captain Spirit that Daniel does gain control over his powers, so, if I had to put money on it, I'd say we were in for some satisfying puzzle sections during which we have to direct Daniel to manipulate stuff with his powers in order to help us achieve our end goal. Kind of like that section in which Sean is handcuffed to a pipe, only with more supernatural powers, and hopefully it will be less distressing. Either way, it'll be interesting to see what Daniel can achieve with his powers, especially if it means more nuanced control than the huge destructive wave we've seen thus far. Our next Life is Strange theory doesn't so much concern the Diaz brothers directly as it does Sean's friend Lyla, because if you ask me, she's going to come looking. Lyla is one of my favourite characters in Life is Strange 2 so far. She's witty and fun, and most importantly, she was one of the central parts of the opening of the game, as it established everything that was important to Sean, as well as everything he was about to lose. Flash forward to the scene in the motel, and we can see from her stream of text messages, and the difference in tone between hers and the ones Sean gets from Jen, who is suddenly officious and clinical, and it's easy to see that Lyla really does care about Sean, and that she truly needs him to be okay. At the end of this section, of course, Sean throws his phone away, severing that line of communication with Lyla entirely. Given the intensity with which she obviously cares for Sean and Daniel's welfare, however, can we really expect her to stay put and wait for news? I honestly don't think so. Lyla herself talked about wanting to escape her hometown, so the concept of hitting the road clearly isn't alien to her, and I think it's fairly likely she's going to take matters into her own hands at some point and try to find the Diaz brothers herself. I'm sure Daniel will be delighted given his absolutely whopping crush on her. Just 2 theories left on this little Life is Strange list, and to be perfectly honest with you, this next one isn't so much a theory as a guarantee, because I know for a fact that whatever happens to Mushroom the dog, we will be completely unable to deal with it. Toward the end of episode 1, Sean and Daniel get hold of a puppy which Daniel swiftly and inexplicably names Mushroom. It's an adorable moment, but in my opinion it's also one of the cruelest things Don't Nod has ever done to its players, because I am now going to be worrying constantly about the welfare of that precious little bean. Hopefully we'll see her grow into an actual dog, hopefully nothing bad will ever befall her, and hopefully that little tail never stops wagging, but whatever happens, I know I will be completely unable to cope. Just to reiterate though, in case anyone from Don't Nod is watching, if you harm one hair on her precious little head, we will riot. That's not to say I'm not worried about the trials and tribulations of the Diaz brothers, who are, actual humans in Life is Strange 2, of course. In fact, the final theory in this little roundup is that the boys will get the chance to genuinely relax and enjoy themselves at some point in the future. Again, this is as much an honest hope as it is a theory, because, see, Episode 1 is pretty relentless. Even in the moments in which Daniel is having a great time, Sean struggles under the weight of his newfound responsibilities, not to mention knowing that his father is dead, but not knowing how to tell his younger brother. Taking a car ride with Brody is the first time the boys are made to feel genuinely safe and like they can let their guard down for a moment, and they pretty much immediately fall asleep. That's how exhausting this journey is for them. It's impactful to say the very least, and for me it really sets Life is Strange 2 apart from anything we've seen before from the Life is Strange universe. But to maintain that same level of pressure throughout the game is to run the risk of lessening its impact. I really hope, for the boys' sake as much as our own, they get the chance to genuinely kick back together, even if it's only for a brief period. They're good kids at heart, but they're up against an extremely hostile world, so hopefully they'll find a bit of respite from the constant onslaught at least once during their journey. And there you have it, 7 theories about Life is Strange 2 now we've played through the first episode. Nothing quite as wacky as Kate Marsh is secretly a skin changer, or the woman behind the 2 whales is an alternative universe Max, or hey, Rachel Amber was working with Jefferson the whole time, but hopefully you still found them interesting. Doubtless you'll have some theories of your own, and we'd love to hear about those in the comments below. If you're still hungry for more Life is Strange, we've got loads of videos ready for you to watch, so just give one of those a click. Either way, thank you very much for watching this one, and have a lovely day. See you soon.